Hi, I'm Krutika, and today's conversation is with Sanjana. For most of us, we'll spend a significant portion of our lives in the corporate grind, working the traditional 9 to 5. It's an accepted way of life, and we often ride it out while navigating the inevitable trials and tribulations that come with it. Add today's highly competitive landscape into the mix, and many of us feel compelled to stay in a job that may not be fulfilling or provide the right environment for us to learn, grow, and feel valued. That's not the case for Sanjana. As a Gen Z professional, she's recognised early on how to navigate corporate life in a way that works for her rather than the other way around. After experiencing a toxic work environment in her first job, she launched the Corporate Girl podcast to fill a gap she herself was searching for: honest, practical, and unfiltered advice on navigating the corporate world. She's also co-authored a book aptly titled Breathe and Go Again, aimed at young job seekers and graduates taking their first steps into the workplace. Sanjana is wise beyond her years, and what stands out for me is the resilience she's demonstrating as she builds a successful path in the corporate world and beyond. Hello, Sanjana. So good to have you on my podcast. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, enjoying my Sunday. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. I know before we hit the record button, you were talking about an event that you had yesterday, which I think is quite a special event. The launch of your book. How was it?
It was it was honestly just so surreal. Like having that many people show up and support me is just so nice. And it's like it's not much to ask for, but it's so nice to know that people will just show up for you. And yeah, like honestly, I was just so grateful the whole time to see so many people around. And I feel like also within these kind of events, you really need to be able to like appreciate and live in the moment, because usually you're just running around and you're trying to look after everyone. So I really tried to just like soak it in more than just do the operational stuff, which was really nice. Thank you.
Amazing. And so, are you feeling a little bit worse for wear this morning? Did it get messy with a few drinks, or were you actually quite sensible?
We were actually quite sensible. We did pop a champagne bottle, which went everywhere, but you've got
Amazing.
to do that every time, right? And then we had some confetti. Some glasses got broken, but that's because I think like someone was just next to it, so it got knocked down. Because honestly, it was like 3 p.m. and I was like, guys, no one has drank that much so far to be doing that like this early. So, but it was just amazing.
Could I just ask, for my listeners who may not know who you are, who is Sanjana Dawa?
So, Sanjana, so I am a very new author. So my book actually only got released last week, which is so amazing. So essentially, the book is for people within their early career who are looking for advice about the working world. So anyone who isn't sure how to network, how to find a mentor, how to look after like your well-being, that's kind of how I support them. And then I do some kind of like workshops as well with organizations. So for examples, with the charity Young Minds, I've done a workshop with them and with the young people. So there's kind of exercises within the book, such as like a growth and fixed mindset, just to help them think a little bit more positively. And I know that it's quite daunting when you go into the working world if you haven't really been prepared for it. So I kind of want to be that big sister for people. So yeah, that's me. And then to be honest, that is my side hustle. So I do have a full-time job. And I have, yeah, so I'm an account manager for like a social impact firm, but I think my side hustle is probably the more interesting part of me.
I love that. I love that you've mentioned that you do have your full time job. You've got this side hustle as well, and you seem to be excelling in both, which is fantastic. I mean, can you take us back actually to the beginning of your career and your sort of relationship with work and how that sort of led you to, I suppose, writing the book and all the wisdom that you currently have?
So originally, when I was at university, I studied psychology. So I always knew I wanted to do something where I was making an impact on people. And then I ended up doing a placement when I was at uni. And I realized that actually I don't want to be a clinical psychologist anymore, because I realized how stressful it was. So I worked on a suicide hotline actually, which was
Wow.
intense, like very intense, because as someone who's like 21 years old, like it's not something that you're really trained for at that age, and you're not really allowed to give advice because you haven't been trained. So it put me in a bit of a difficult position. And to be honest, my friends and family as well, they realized that I was so stressed because I graduated like around COVID time. So I was doing
Mm.
this work during then, and obviously so many people were calling in at that time. So that's basically when I realized, you know what? I do still want to make an impact on people, but maybe not the clinical route. Um, so I'm really glad I did it though, and I would encourage people to do placements at university because that is the only way you figure out what you want to do, if you actually have experience in it. So after that, it was quite hard to find a job, and I thought that I am like a people's person. I'm quite extroverted, so I thought maybe sales would be a good option for me. And to be honest, psychology is so broad as it is, so you can kind of use your skills anywhere. So I ended up going into recruitment. I was there for about a year and a half, and I think, to be honest, for the first 6 months, I quite enjoyed it. And then after that, I think it was a mix between like my performance, but also I think the environment was just quite toxic. Like a lot of people around me started leaving. People didn't really enjoy it. The KPIs were, like, very harsh, and I kind of felt like a number, and I was like, this is not what I stand for," like, I should be appreciated for the work that I do rather than be seen as a number. So yeah, that's kind of what happened in that role, and then so I was okay in the first 6 months, and then I thought maybe it would be worth trying a different team to see if that made a difference for me, but unfortunately it didn't, and I think, to be honest, I had quite a tough time with my manager because, to be honest, she was the kind of person where she would give you praise if you've done really well. She would kind of prioritize you, but if you weren't performing so well, she would just not bat an eye basically towards you, which is not really what you want because the people who need support are the ones that need you. So I was quite disappointed in that, and I think that just instantly put me off. And then I got to a point where like I just started burning out completely. I wasn't sleeping enough, I wasn't eating enough, I was just like working long hours at work. And then I was just like, yeah, honestly, like I just had the Sunday scaries basically all the time. And then I had to make a decision, and I realized that I think it's time to move on. And I basically actually quit without having another job in hand, which tells you, exactly how I was feeling about it because especially in this job market, that's not really something that people do anymore. So, but it was impacting my well-being so much that I was like, you know what, like on to bigger and better things, and this is just not meant for me. And then after that, I've now been in my role for about 2.5 years. I absolutely love what I do now. I think the thing is, to be honest, like fulfillment is a big part of working for me. And I just didn't find that in the last role. It was quite transactional.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And, what a journey to go from working on, as part of your placement, that suicidal hotline. I can only imagine that would have been quite a intense placement, especially if you didn't have the training to then sort of move into, recruitment, realizing you're in that toxic environment. But how self aware of you to recognize that that just was not the right fit? Because a lot of times people don't always recognize when the environment is not right from them. They just sort of ride it out. They don't take that brave step like you did to hand in your resignation without having something else to fall back on, and to then find what you're doing now that you are really relishing in and you're enjoying. Now, you mentioned the toxic environment that you were in when you entered recruitment. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what was it about that environment that made it toxic?
So I just think that it was like very transactional, and I think also I don't know, I mean, to be honest, it's because I'm comparing it to the role I'm in now, and to be honest, I just feel like I wasn't really valued to the fullest extent. And I think obviously when you're doing a job 9 to 5, you don't want to feel like that. So that was the first thing. And then the other thing I think was, I think there was a lot of competing against colleagues, and that's really, really toxic. Honestly, like for example, obviously I'm still in sales now, but I just don't feel that same effect. Like yes, we have a bit of a leaderboard, but I know that we're all on our same on the same journey, so I think that was something I struggled with as well because I'm not really the kind of person who likes that competitive nature.
And I guess it's sort of recognizing, once you're in that environment, that environment is not right for you, and you wouldn't have known until you'd entered it as well, I suppose, right? Was there a particular scenario, Sanjana, that really pushed you over the edge, or a particular event that happened at work that really made you question things? That was the ultimate, I'm handing in my resignation without having any other job lined up kind of thing.
I think, to be honest, there were probably a few different moments. I wouldn't say there's like one big moment, but I think it was just
Mm.
a few things that led up to it. So, for example, we were like there was me and my colleagues, and we were all basically recruiting for the same job. So like my manager basically made a comment where she was like, "Guys, like run, be fast, like the best person's gonna get the person recruited." And I was just like, this is not how it works. I think recruitment is a bit of a numbers game. And I do think, to be honest, even with sales, some of it is pure luck. You can't really control what happens all the time. And also I just felt like I was trying my best, but I just wasn't getting anything out of it. And I think, like sometimes when a job isn't for you, but because I was trying so hard and I wasn't getting anything out of it, I basically realized that, you know what, like it's okay to accept defeat. It doesn't mean that I failed, but like I've got to just take that step back because the environment wasn't right for me, but also the job just wasn't either.
What made you want to go into recruitment actually after your psychology degree? Was it sort of a mapped out decision, or were you thinking about your skill set and thinking, oh, recruitment will be aligned? Or was it just one of those, oh, this job came up, let's try it out?
So because I graduated just after COVID, I think the job market was quite hard as it was. And to be honest, a lot of my friends, I think all of them, went and did a
Mm.
master's. So I was the only one who was actually applying for jobs. And it puts you in a tough position because you're not sure how to apply if you don't really have that support around you. So I think it was something that I actually just came up. And I think, to be honest, they probably saw that I had a psychology degree, which kind of aligned to it anyway. And I knew I was a bit of a people's person. I knew that I was quite extroverted. So I thought maybe it's something that I just want to try. Like, I know I've never done it before, but it should also push me out of my comfort zone. And whilst I feel like it really wasn't the role for me, I feel like I've learned so much from it. And I wouldn't even regret going back, to be honest, because I just feel like I needed that learning experience, and I wouldn't be the confident person that I am today if I hadn't done that role.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were going through, I suppose, the emotions that you might have been feeling in the workplace, with that toxic environment, a manager that you didn't think was so great, what were you doing to try and manage your well-being? Because you were obviously there for a little while before you then decided you're going to up and quit.
Yeah, so I did speak to my director about it because I basically said to him that I'm not really enjoying the role that I'm doing. Would it be worth maybe switching teams? And he was happy to do that. But I think also I tried it and it didn't work. And I think even if you try, that's when you realize that, you know what, like at least I've put what I could into it and it's just not for me. It was kind of like a sign for me where I was like, you know what, I've tried my best. I can't actually do anything else. And then I think the other bit, and this kind of comes back to where you asked, was there a point which made you feel like, was it a toxic environment? So my dog passed away, and it was during the workday. And when I went back home, I just felt so guilty about not working. And you shouldn't really have to feel like that when you're grieving. So I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure if that's because of the way that the workplace made me feel, or if that was just something that I internally felt but it was just something that I felt. And to be honest, it's really stuck with me because I feel like when you're in a workplace, they should never ever treat you like that. And yes, like I understand some people don't have pets, some people don't get it. And I get it. Like it's not like it's a parent, but it's also a very close part of you. So for me, like I do feel guilty when I went through the grieving process because now I just feel like I was just so focused on work that I didn't really get the time to heal from it.
Gosh, that's horrible. I mean, I My husband and his family, they had a pet dog. Sadly, he's passed away as well. But when he did pass away, it was like they were grieving a family member, and it's something that a lot. I mean, I'm fortunate. The employer I work with, they are very good around things like that. But I can only imagine if your employer isn't, it's a shitty situation.
Mm.
And um, do you think? Do you think the toxic environment was isolated to your team, or was it a cultural thing across the organization?
It was definitely a cultural thing, because I'm still in touch with a lot of people, who used to work at the organization at the same time as me, and they all said that they felt the same way. So I think that also gave me some kind of, um, hope in a way, because I knew that I wasn't the only one who was feeling like that, because there were so many other people who've also now just quit because they didn't like it at all.
Yeah. And so when often when you hand in a resignation, you tend to provide reasons. How candid were you or not in terms of your reasons for leaving? Or was that quite difficult to navigate?
I did make it quite clear to my manager that, I'm looking for a role where it's not as transactional and that I am looking to help people. And she was quite transparent with me and she did say, like, I don't think this role is for you if that's what you're looking for. Which also kind of tells you everything you need to know about the organization, because you should want to help people within your role. Why wouldn't you want to do that in the first place, you know? And in recruitment, you kind of do that anyway. So, that was an interesting comment that she made. But, yeah, I mean, I didn't really do a huge like exit interview or leaving drinks or anything like that, because I just at that point I was like, you know what, I'm so burnt out, I'm so stressed, and I just need to look after my well-being. So yeah, at that point, to be honest, I didn't do an exit interview, but I also think I wasn't as confident as I am now. So, if I ever was to leave where I was now, I also, to be honest, am very transparent now as well about how I feel. Like if I have an issue, I just go straight to my manager and I say, for example, I didn't like the way that this person spoke to me. I didn't appreciate that, and it takes a lot of courage to get to that point. And I think younger me would be so proud because I never used to be that person.
You seem to, from a young age, have figured out, and have got this innate confidence in you that just means, nah, I'm not going to stand for that shit. And you
Mm.
go ahead and you go and have the right conversations, which is brilliant. I guess what I was trying to uncover through that question, Sanjana, was that sometimes corporations or organizations can actually benefit from hearing the truth, however, hard it might be. I mean, you're speaking about it quite honestly, in this forum, which will obviously go out in the public space.
Mm.
Is there something in particular that you would love your employer to hear from you? That would have made your experience slightly different?
I mean, I think giving people a chance and giving them some grace, if someone is struggling, just try and support them, rather than look down on them or that kind of thing. That's the main thing I would say, to be honest, because yes, even in the role that I'm in at the moment, there has been times where, yeah, I haven't been making that many sales, but not once have I ever been made to feel like that. And yeah, that would probably be what I would love to say to them.
Now, you have also launched your own podcast, the Corporate Girl Podcast. Was that inspired from, I suppose, your experiences in your sort of role post graduating?
I started that because I actually do think it's because of my old workplace, and I'm so grateful that I did start it because, to be honest, at that point when I had left, I was just like, I don't know what to do. No one's guided me how to get through this. And I didn't know anyone else who was going through the same thing because everyone else was in secure jobs. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start listening to podcasts. I'm going to start reading books. I'm going to do my own research, basically. And I basically found a gap in the market because I realized there is no podcast out there which is helping young people with the challenges that they're facing within the workplace. And it's something that I wish I had, especially when I had just left university. I feel like it would have just prepared me a lot more, and maybe I wouldn't have ended up doing the job that I was doing. So that's kind of why I started it, because I didn't really want any other young person to feel like I had ever felt before. So I've actually co-authored on it with someone from my old work, and she's a career coach. And I actually went to her when I was having a really tough time, because it's kind of the experience that she's got. And I said to her, you know, I'm really not enjoying what I'm doing. I'm not feeling fulfilled. I don't think it's the right role for me. Do you have any advice? We ended up staying in touch, and she then reached out and she said, I have seen how much you've flourished, and I love the good work that you've done with the podcast. She said, I would love for you to co author with me on this book because I know you've got that experience, and I want you to be able to show the experience that you've got as well to other young people. So yeah, it's been a really good journey, and I feel like I'm finally seeing the impact of what I'm doing as well because, for example, I do like workshops as well with like organizations like Young Minds and then my old school and things like that. And, you know, I've had so many people now come up to me or write me messages and say, thank you so much for making me understand that it's okay to not know what you want to do when you leave university, because there is so much pressure for young people around that. And there's so much pressure to just find a job because of the way that the job market is going. But I think sometimes this is exactly what the book talks about, right? Like that's why it's called Breathe Then Go Again, because sometimes you just need to take a step back and realize that it's okay if you want to scope out your options,
Yeah.
and you can always restart if you need to.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning your book actually, because I was going to ask you specifically about that title, which is quite an interesting one, you know, Breathe and Then Go Again. How did that title come about? Was that a collaborative decision between you and your co author? Was it just intuitive to be like, yeah, this is the right title? Or was it a case of brainstorming and really thinking it through?
I mean, to be honest, I think they reached out to us, and they said that these are the selections of the titles that you can choose from. And between my co author and I, we just wanted to choose something that we felt resonated best with young people. It really sums up the book really well as well. So that's kind of how it came about. And to be honest, also, I think they needed to take into consideration because it is a series of books. So mine is about resilience within the workplace, but there are other ones like communication within the workplace, how to become more confident, things like that as well. So I think it was most applicable to the book that we were writing. But yeah, I'm honestly like I just love the title of it.
No, it's a great title. I mean, writing a book can be quite the tedious process. It's a labor of love. I'm sure it would have been months or maybe years in the making. And it's, you know, what I'm trying to understand is what was that process like for you? Have you written other books? Have you been a blogger before?
I mean, to be honest, when she asked me to do it, I was so excited, and I had to say yes. You know, you don't get these opportunities very often, and I knew that it was going to be hard work because it was outside of my 9 to 5, but it was something that I knew that I was just going to put the time and effort into because I knew that it was going to pay off in the end. And I think also when you're doing something like this, you're so passionate about it that it doesn't even feel like it's extra work because you just enjoy what you do. Took about a year to write it. So, to be honest, it was a little bit difficult, I think, especially with the use of AI in this world. We weren't allowed to use any of that. So it's quite difficult to brainstorm what we wanted to talk about, but essentially what we did was we did about 7 or 8 chapters, and I basically spoke to my co-author and I said, this is what I've struggled with in the workplace. This is what I think would be useful for young people, and these are the chapters that I think I'd be confident to write about. And then she also did the same basically for her side. And then yeah, that's kind of how it worked. It was my first book, and I've never been a blogger, so I'm not a big writer. So to be honest, it was very out of my comfort zone. But also, I think I'm glad that it was targeted towards young people because I think it made it easier to write it. Just because, for example, when I read a book, I don't want something that's too complex because it's just too difficult to understand. And for young people, I knew that that was something that had to be key as part of the book.
They do say simplicity is best because if you're someone that can break things down or articulate in a simplified manner, it actually
Mm.
means you understand it better as
Yeah.
well. Now, I wanted to ask you something about co authoring.
Mm.
Was there ever moments where, you had disagreements or you were butting heads over something that you both didn't necessarily align with? And you may not have had those experiences, but I'm just intrigued because when you write your own book, you have full control, I suppose,
Mm.
over, the whatever it is that you're writing. But if you've got add somebody else into the mix, another author, you're then having to be mindful of that other person and their views so that the book feels like it's coherent,
Mm.
and so were there any challenges in that respect, Sanjana, from your point of view?
Yeah, really interesting question. And I think, yes, there were for sure. It's very different when you've got someone else, who's also doing it. And we did it all online as well, which is a whole different thing. So, every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., we would basically jump on a call, and we would just talk about where we're at, what support we need, that kind of thing, just to brainstorm. But I think the most we clashed was when we both wrote our first chapter and I read hers and it was a bit too complex. And I basically had to speak to her and I said, for the target audience, I think you need to make it a little bit easier for them to read. And I think, to be honest, that is the reason why she brought me onto the book, right? Because she wanted a young person's experience. So from that side, I think that was the main thing that went wrong. But other than that, also, I mean, there was things that sometimes I wrote in the book where she was like, I don't completely agree with it. So for example, originally in the text, I had written that, oh, like you should really try and just push through and consider your options and just stay in the workplace unless you have to quit. And I was obviously taking the job market into consideration. And she said that I don't agree with that completely. And the reason she said that was because of my experience, right? Where I quit. And she was like, if you hadn't quit when you did, you wouldn't have got the experience that you got. So it's not the best advice basically to give to other people. And I understood it. And actually, I ended up changing it because I actually agreed with it. And this is why it's actually quite nice to have a co-author with you because at least they can kind of proofread for you, and also sometimes think of ideas that maybe you haven't thought of.
And that's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the first chapter that your co author wrote and you having to give that feedback to say, I'm not sure it's going to hit the target market with the way it's been written. It can sometimes be difficult to give that kind of feedback. So, how did you navigate that? Were you nervous about it? Did you think beforehand what you were going to say? Or was it that you already had that psychological safety between the two of you and that trust to just say it as it is?
I think I was a little bit nervous. I think giving anyone feedback can be a bit nerve-wracking, but I knew it was something that had to be done at the start because it was the first chapter. So, to be honest, I thought that the best way to do it is probably over video call rather than any other way. I kind of just said it how it was, but not in a way that, she's made a mistake, but more actually, I think that this is what's going to resonate with someone. That was the main reason she wanted me on the book anyway. So I think more than it being a criticism, she took it on as like a value add, rather than anything else. We have a great relationship, and she actually messaged me today saying that you are so good at social media, you're so good at public speaking. Like I'm so excited to see how you flourish. So I'm so grateful to her for giving me this opportunity. But I think obviously with co-authors it always happens, where and I think also like we didn't know each other that well, like realistically speaking, we only met twice within the workplace when I worked with her.
Wow.
So I really didn't actually know her like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd assumed you might have had a longer standing relationship prior to the co authoring, which adds a
Right.
whole new additional dynamic
Yeah.
to, yeah, navigating things as well,
Yeah.
right? What have you learned through this experience of writing a book?
I think writer's block is very real. And I know people obviously say it a lot, but I didn't realize that it was actually a thing until I started doing it. And I think also just brainstorming and writing down your ideas is better than not writing anything at all. And that was kind of the way that I wrote the book because, obviously it was outside of my 9 to 5. So having to do it, realistically, the only time that I did it was 6 p.m. onwards after work. So basically just staying on my laptop and having maybe some TV on in the background so that I felt like I had a mix of both. Also doing it on the train back sometimes or on the way to work. Doing it on the weekends, but also making sure that it didn't disrupt my social life because again, I didn't want to burn out. So from that way, I think I would love to write a second one, to be honest. Honestly, like having seen the impact of it, and I've had so many messages already from people saying that it's been so useful to read it because it's got like real life case studies of my friends who have also faced challenges within the workplace. So it is a really practical guide more than just a book to read and then you put it away, but more when you are in need of a certain chapter, you can just pick it up and read it, you know? Also, another one would be like networking is so important. Networking is huge. Like if I hadn't made that connection with her, this would not have happened. And it's so weird because the way that we actually met was I think she basically came into the workplace. It was our first day. I didn't know who she was. She didn't even work on my floor. But I just said, "Oh, hey, like I know you're new. Do you want to be shown around? Do you want to have some lunch together? You know, that kind of thing." If we hadn't bumped into each other at that time, none of this would have happened.
Amazing. Can I just touch on something you said about networking being a thing? Now, you mentioned you're quite an extroverted character, so someone like yourself, networking may come easily. For those that perhaps aren't that way inclined or maybe introverted, networking might feel like a scary thing to do. So, do you have any advice, I suppose, on networking? And are there examples that you can give us where networking has paid off for you, in addition to the example you've given here?
I think the advice that I would give is don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Like the biggest blocker that I see in most people is fear of being rejected or fear of being embarrassed by something like that. And I'm like, to be honest, it's going to happen either way. So what is the actual worst that's going to happen? I think that's what you need to think of because I think sometimes people go into panic mode. And especially, for people who may be a bit more introverted, they might not want to put themselves in those kind of rooms. But I know, like, obviously, sometimes I say, like, it's better to go alone because then you don't have to stick with someone. But sometimes it's okay to go with someone as well if you are feeling nervous about networking. But I think like your biggest blocker is probably your fear of not wanting to do that thing. So the minute that you get rid of that fear, you could flourish. So that's probably my first advice. The second thing I'd say is an experience of where networking went really well was so one of my friends from university, he knows that I've got the podcast and he knew that I had a book coming out. And I'm not sure if you've watched BBC The Apprentice. He was the videographer for the event and he said, I have been told I can bring a plus one. And he said, I think you should be in the same room as all of these people because they are also entrepreneurs. So I went to the final watch party for the winner of The Apprentice a few
Amazing.
months ago.
Yeah, I remember seeing this on your
Yeah.
socials actually. That's great.
Yeah. So it was insane, right? Because again, it was such a full circle moment because I was like, I can't believe I'm in rooms like this now. Like, you never really expect it to happen to you. But again, if I
Mm.
hadn't put myself out there, if I hadn't put the podcast out there, if you didn't know about the book, he wouldn't given me that opportunity. And also, I think he did say to me at the end of the event, he was like, "Sorry, I know I haven't been with you throughout the night, but I knew that you would be okay by yourself, which is why I wanted to bring you along." So that from that side, I think also like really just putting yourself out there is so important. And interestingly, also, so one of the candidates, Priyesh from The Apprentice, came to my book launch party yesterday as well, which is insane. Like being able to say that someone from The Apprentice has come to my book launch party blows my mind. Like I didn't think that this was going to happen, and it just has.
Oh, well, kudos to you and congrats once again for obviously the hard work, the effort, the resilience that you've put in and, driving what it is that you are passionate about. Could I just ask how comfortable was it or not being in that room where you've got entrepreneurs who are doing really well. They've been on TV. Were you feeling nervous or anxious opening up a conversation with them? Because I can only imagine there might be a feeling of, and I feel this quite acutely in certain rooms that I'm in, the kind of imposter creep in.
Yeah.
How was it being in that room of people who are, air quotes, more successful, I suppose?
To be honest, I think there were definitely nerves there because I honestly, like, I was speaking to my family about it before and I was like, what should I ask them? Like, it was like I'd just forgotten how to network. I don't know what had happened to me in that moment, but I think I just wanted to make sure I made a good impression, more than anything. So, I was nervous, but also there's this quote that there's this famous author, and she's a makeup artist. She's an Asian makeup artist called Anchal, and there's something she said to me when I went to her book launch. She said, "Fake it till you make it." And since then, I have never forgotten that quote, and I do it every time I go networking now, or every time I'm on a panel or a podcast. I always just remember fake it till you make it because the only person who really knows that you're afraid is yourself and no one else? And it's so true because, like if you make a mistake, no one's gonna realize, it's not a big deal. So I think, yeah, I was nervous when I went into the room, but then I think eventually I just had the confidence to start going up to people and, it's very hard to go up to these people who are, like, very successful, who've been on TV, that kind of thing. But honestly, like, if I hadn't taken those chances then, none of this would have happened, and I know it's scary, but it's better to put yourself out there than not because, again, you are the only one who's gonna be able to create your own opportunities, and I think nowadays as well, what I'm trying to explain to young people is that, outside of university, when you come out you're not just gonna be handed something on a plate. You really need to work for it to be able to get there, and I think particularly, like, for example, in my workplace, my manager, he knows everything about, like, the book and the podcast and things, but I think it really helps you to add an edge to yourself because they know that you're driven, not in just inside of work, but outside as well.
Can I ask, as you were talking, I was just thinking the wisdom that you are kind of exuding there, does it come also from the fact that you've done a psychology degree? Because I feel like those that understand how the mind works
Yeah.
are often in on a little secret that others are probably missing out on. And the reason I say that is because over the years, I've become very curious about sort of the mind, how, kind of thinking about reframing perspectives, because all of it is just your mind, the chatter in your head, nobody else sort of hears but you. And you kind of put that, isn't it? No one knows you're afraid
Yeah.
but you.
With the degree that I had, it's interesting because we learnt about, like, different things. So we learnt about, like, forensic
Mm,
psychology, clinical, things like ADHD, how to manage those symptoms. So, not so much. However, I think having done that psychology degree helped me to write the book because I used so many case studies from psychologists, like that
wow.
fixed and growth mindset, for example.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that it was something that I was using in my everyday life until I basically looked it up. So I think that having that kind of experience and having read so many self-help books really helped me to write the book because I already knew what bits of books I already liked. But it was just, like, pulling it together, from that side.
Do you have a favourite self-help book, Sanjana, that you'd recommend? In addition to your own, of course.
Ooh, yeah. That's a good question. I really like, it's called Tuesdays with Maury, and it's basically about, a university student and his lecturer, and his lecturer has ALS, and he goes to visit him every week because they had a really close, relationship at university. And essentially, every chapter teaches you a different life lesson, which is really, really nice. And the thing is, like, the reason I liked the story was, first of all, I think it's a true story, which obviously adds an edge anyway. But I think it wasn't just telling me things that I wanted to hear, and that's what a lot of self-help books do. And that's definitely something that I didn't want to do as part of my book. I wanted it to be practical, and I didn't want people to just read it once and then forget about it. But I wanted them to know that this is kind of your comfort guide if you need to come back to it. So that's what I slightly did differently to the self-help books I had already read. Sorry.
Yeah. So, as part of writing this book, you would have done a bit of research, I imagine, reading other people's books, journals or whatever. Was there something in addition to like the fixed growth mindset that you said, you realized, oh wow, I was already doing that? Was there something profound that you learned that you weren't aware of before? And you were like, oh my God, I'm actually going to, take that on board in how I carry myself in the corporate workspace or how I can navigate situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think around the chapter that I did around mentoring was quite important. And what I basically said to people, sometimes I just feel like, you write something and you don't take your own advice. And I feel like sometimes I'm still like that, like I'm stressed in the workplace and everyone's like, Sanjana, you need to read your book. um, you know, but there was a bit as part of mentoring where I said that it doesn't have to be, like, a big thing, it doesn't need to be, like, even it doesn't need to be someone within work. It can be anyone, it can be someone who's younger than you, because I think there's, like, an expectation that when you network and when you mentor someone, it's quite a professional thing, but it doesn't have to be, and that's something that I learned as well because there's so many people that I have networked with now, but we're also friends now, so, I think giving that kind of advice also is really important to tell people because I know when you put the word networking on an event, it can make people a bit nervous. But sometimes if you just take that word away and think that it's just a casual chat with some people, that helps. And I think, hopefully I do get into bigger rooms where I do start networking even more. But if it ever comes to a point where I do start panicking, I think that is something that I'm gonna take into consideration when I'm just gonna be like, "You know what? It's just a chat with people more than anything. It's not a big deal."
Such a great way to think about things. I mean, if someone's listening to this and feeling like they're in a situation where, it's toxic, maybe they've got a micromanaging manager, what what advice would you offer for them based on your experiences?
I think I would say see how bad the situation gets. First, assess it. Maybe speak to trusted colleagues that you're friends with, and see if they've felt the same or if they've kind of noticed it as well. But don't let it get to a point where it's going to affect your mental health. If it gets to that point, it's already too late and something should have been done already. But really catching those signs early on is really important. So if you can speak to one of your friends or your colleagues, and if it comes to a point where you're not even sure if the job is for you or if that you're having a tricky situation with your manager, then speak to someone who's a bit more senior, who again is someone who's trusted.
Thank you. I think that's great advice. Seeking, solace in someone who you trust and sharing with them could be really, really beneficial. I
Yeah.
mean, one of the final questions that I ask all my guests in this podcast is, what journey are you on next?
That's a very good question. And actually, interestingly, earlier this week, I was asked, "What's your 5-year plan?" Which is honestly, I said that I don't know what it is, and honestly, I'm taking it one step at a time. But I think for me, I just want to keep making an impact on young people. I want to keep doing these kind of workshops where I go and speak to them and help them to realize that it's okay to not have everything figured out because, I think as adults, we are kind of expected to do that. But no one really has it figured out. So no one needs to stress about it, honestly. So I think that that's probably what I would say. And then also, maybe just taking some more time out for me. I think at the moment I've just been on the go constantly with the book launch and advertising and, doing marketing and a full-time job alongside that. So I think I also need to start taking my own advice and just take a step back a little bit and just relax. So I actually have a spa day booked in
Amazing.
Friday, which is really good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Which spa are you doing?
It's in Tower Bridge. It's called the
Amazing.
Renner Spa, which would be really nice. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure very well deserved. Thank you once again for joining me for what's been a really interesting conversation.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing, and I'm hoping that it does make an impact on people.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Journeys with Krutika. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and share. I'd love for you to hit the follow button wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you have a journey that you want to share, email me at journeyswithkrutika@gmail.com or reach out via my socials. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Just search Journeys with Krutika because your journey is extraordinary.